Okay, I think we're connected, good to go. Be starting momentarily. Okay, it's 6 by my clock, so we'll start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Uh, so I'm going to start this week and for the subsequent 5 weeks to discuss the five aggregates, the kanda, and today's talk will just be a probably relatively brief. It will be a general introduction or overview, and then for the next 5 weeks, I'll deal with the aggregates one by one. So I uh, subtitled this talk "Slicing the Pie," because this is basically what the Buddha is doing with this teaching. He's looking at the human organism as a whole, the body and mind, and identifying the principal components. Um, and these are called the aggregates, the five kanda. And the reason it's translated as aggregate is because an aggregate is an accumulation of uh, disparate things, an aggregation. So, some older translations call them the bundles or the heaps, which is okay as well. And the point being made is that each aggregate is not the end of the line as far as analysis goes. These are broad categories, and each one can be further analyzed. And we'll get into that with the individual aggregates. But this serves as the first pass looking at the human organism, identifying the major components. Now, one thing about the Buddha's teaching, his teaching always has a practical or soteriological purpose. He's not, or he was not interested in simply describing things from a purely theoretical point of view, just for kind of intellectual interest. The discourses of the Buddha always have this point: how does this help us towards our spiritual evolution, towards our liberation? And the five aggregates, almost always when they come up, it's for the purpose of uh, illustrating the principle, the very crucial principle of emptiness or not self, anatta, that we can look at these five aggregates and nowhere, and these are constitute the sum total of a human organism, and nowhere within the five aggregates do we find such a thing as a self. This was in the Indian context. The self is the Atman, or in Pali, the Atta. So the teaching of not self is called Anatta, or in Sanskrit is Anatman. No, because the idea uh, that was prior to the Buddha and was still popular in India long afterwards, the metaphysical principle of was that of an Atman, an imperishable, which means an imperishable, eternal, unchanging principle in human beings that transmigrates from lifetime to lifetime. And the Buddha said you can't find any such thing. All you find are these aggregates that are themselves, each can be looked at and is seen to have the three characteristics. They're all empty, they're impermanent, and they're imperfect or suffering. The clearest exposition of this, I think, is in the Milinda Panya, the Questions of King Milinda, which was a post-canonical text that had a Greek Bactrian king in dialogue with a Indian Buddhist monk, Milinda and Nagasena. And it takes the form, most of the book takes the form of questions and answers. And actually, you can see the Greek influence in that. It's very much like Plato's dialogues, like Socrates asking questions and teasing out answers. And the section on not self is actually quite extensive. And the place where the five aggregates come in is in the simile of the chariot, where the monk Nagasena asked the king, "How did you arrive at this spot today for our dialogue?" And he said, "Well, I came in my chariot." And he said, "Oh, king, if you were to take that chariot and tear it apart into pieces and throw the backboard here and the baseboard there and the one wheel there and the other wheel there and so forth, where in this pile of parts could you find the essence of chariot?" And the king said, "Well, there's no such thing as essence of chariot." And then after some further back and forth, he gets the king to define chariot as a name, a designation that we give to these parts and pieces when they're properly arranged. And we can call it a chariot. But there's really no essence of chariot. So this then follows, Nagasena then follows this by saying, so it is with the human being. There is just this body, these feelings, these perceptions, these mental formations, and this consciousness, and nothing else besides. And when we examine these five, we can further examine them and break them up further, but nowhere do we find an essence of Nagasena or an essence of Milinda. There is no crucial, eternal, unchanging component. There are just all these parts and pieces that are interconnected, that they have relationships of cause and effect with each other. They work together, and when they're all operating, functioning together, then we can call this a human being. Elsewhere, the Buddha, in a sutta, the Buddha goes through the five aggregates, and he asks for each one if it's subject to change. Yes, it is. Is that which is subject to change suitable to be identified as a self, meaning an Atman in the Indian sense? No, Lord, it is not. No. And or another question is, are the aggregates subject to your control? For example, the body. Can I change my body by wish, by will, by force of my volition? Can I say, may I be taller? May I be shorter? May I be thinner? May I be fatter? No, you cannot change the body by mere wishing. So is that which is not subject to your control suitable to say, this is me, this is mine? And you can go through all the five aggregates the same way. Elsewhere, again, the Buddha uses the aggregates as a matrix to talk about different ways in which beings create the illusion of a self. And he identifies 20 ways in which this is done. Take the 5 aggregates and multiply them by 4. For any aggregate, you can say, take the body. I can say, I am the body, or uh, the body is mine, or I am in the body, or the body is in me. And these 4 ways, this I am, this is mine, I am in this is in me. They represent can be applied to each of the 5 aggregates. So this makes 20 ways in which beings falsely attribute a self. It always ends up being one of these relationships. Now, dividing this human organism, this pie, as I used the metaphor, dividing it into 5 is in some sense it's rather arbitrary, because it can be done in other ways. In the Abhidhamma, all of reality is divided into 4 essential categories, and these overlap to some degree with the system of the 5 aggregates. We have chitta, which corresponds more or less to vijnana, and I'll deal with this topic in a bit more depth in the talk on vijnana. Then we have a rupa, which corresponds exactly in the 2 systems. But then in the Abhidhamma, we have the category of Chaitasika, which means those things those states which occur alongside of Chitta. Chaitasika literally means associated with Chitta. So, in other words, all the other mental components that are not consciousness, that are not Chitta. And these Chaitasikas correspond to the aggregates of perception, feeling, and mental formations. Well, they're all lumped together in this scheme. And then the 4th category is not included in the aggregates, is nibbana, the unconditioned, which is, as we can see by analogy here, that nibbana is the only thing in our experience outside the 5 aggregates. So these 2 systems are compatible. They're not contradictory. They're just different ways of slicing the pie into either 4 or 5 slices, but you're dealing with the same pie. This is the same reality of a human organism, and it's just where we choose to place our focus, how we want to analyze it. So this represents the Buddhist system of psychology at its most its broadest overview. The system of Buddhist psychology is the 5 aggregates, and we'll see that as we examine the mental aggregates, how it's understood that the mind works and how we cognize objects and what is our relationship to objects. So I think that I said this was going to be fairly brief because this is just the introduction to the topic. So I think I'll stop here, and this will give us a fair bit of time for questions if there's any questions to deal with. And if you want to ask about specific aggregates, I would wait until that week that we're dealing with that topic. But if anyone has general questions, type them into the chat now. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. I guess it does not really. Let's see. Maybe here's one. Is there a discussion of why the Buddha chose five aggregates? Um, no, there is not explicit reasoning there given. But I think when we see the individual aggregates and their relationship, the system makes sense. Um, I could also say another way that the Buddha sliced the pie, so to speak, was sometimes he talked about the totality of the being as comprised in the six senses, or the sometimes that's multiplied by three, so that you have 18 factors. You have the physical sense organ, the consciousness associated with that, and the object associated with that. And that scheme, which is actually quite common in the suttas, I would say is more of a subjective or phenomenological approach. Well, this is from the point of view of our experience. This is all that we experience are the six senses and their organs and objects. And the five khandha represent a more exterior or objective view of looking at the organism from the outside and seeing how can we understand this thing. Are all things, including rupa, experienced as chitasakas phenomenologically? Yes, I would say that that's true. That's an interesting discussion of the and this kind of refers back to what I was just talking about, the six senses. When we look at the phenomenological reality, then the actual experience, then they're all things are objects to consciousness. And the Buddha even says, when he talks about the world, he means these six senses, because that is, for practical purposes, from our experience, that is the world, or our six senses. In the description of the Arahant, what is meant by done what has to be done? It means he's finished. He's done the work of achieving arahantship, and there's nothing more to be done. Next question. In Anguttara Nikaya, a monk asks if there is anything outside the five aggregates, and Anda rejects all the tetralemma and says the monk is trying to proliferate the unproliferated. What does this mean? Well, the only thing outside the five aggregates in the Orthodox Theravada system is nibbana. And nibbana can't really be spoken of. And the tetralemma is often used to illustrate the ineffability of nibbana. The tetralemma are the four logical poles of Indian thought. That this, whatever we're speaking of it, the four possibilities are X exists, X doesn't exist, X both exists and doesn't exist, X neither exists nor not exists. And none of these apply to nibbana, meaning it's entirely outside of any logical system. It can't be comprehended by the ordinary mind. How is clinging to consciousness when jnana overcome? Is this something a stream entry level headspace is needed for, or is it something readily attainable to most of us? Well, until the moment of stream entry, there always remains some sense of self. It can be attenuated, and it should be. You should be working towards attenuating it and bring stream entry closer. But it's not fully overcome until stream entry. So there'll always be some identification to one of the aggregates, and very often that's consciousness. But some people identify with the body. Some people identify with thinking, which is mental formations. So it's something to observe in oneself and not to believe in, to try and see it as a fundamental error. Why is control related with self? For example, we could change our body in any way. Why would that make it self? Well, the aspect of self that the Buddha was focusing on here was this is mine. If this truly is mine, then I can do what I want with it. And there's those four aspects of self view. There's this is me, this is mine, I am in this, that is in me. And sometimes this is simplified just to saying me or mine, not me, not mine, which is a good short reflection. Okay, there's a question about meditation. If I can get into first jhana by getting access concentration and then looking for pleasant sensation, then dropping the object of meditation and focusing on that feeling, the pleasant feeling then spreads throughout the body. However, is this the right practice when it feels like I'm chasing jhana, or is there another way to attain it by letting go? Well, there's no single one system. There's uh, multiplicity of different methods of entering jhana. But generally, I think that my usual advice is that when the pleasant feeling, the PT, arises, to be aware of it, but not to change your meditation object, to remain with the breath or whatever you're meditating upon, and let the PT wash over you, and let that carry you deeper. Um, I think that tends to work better than focusing on the PT. A stream enterer will have 7 lives at most. If this is your last life, then you would be protected from not dying before reaching arahantship. Uh, is there an upper age limit to ordination? Oh no, that's a different question. Um, I see. His question is split up with other people's things in between. Um, I'll start again with that one. A stream enterer will have 7 lives at most. If this is your last life, you would be protected from not dying before reaching arahantship, i.e., someone is punching you repeatedly and the fist never touches you, a dog attacks you but never touch you, etc. You're in a car going at high speed, hit a pole head on, but this pole is like a sponge and nothing happens to you, and multiplication similar to them. I suppose we can speculate about that. But also remember that when we say 7 lives at most, they're not necessarily human lives. A person might be in the Dewa realm, where this kind of violent deaths don't occur. So who knows? But also, I think another factor would be that someone who has attained stream entry and is still alive, 7 lifetimes later, they would have a pretty decent karma to be a stream winner, so that these kind of unfortunate things wouldn't be unlikely to happen to them. Is there an upper limit to ordination at Outer River Hermitage or any other Theravada Buddhist monasteries in Canada? Well, at Outer River, we don't do ordinations. We're not set up for that. We don't do that here. In Canada, the only place that has been doing ordinations in recent years is Tsaranaï near Ottawa. And I'm not sure even if they're doing them at present. In our tradition, the Ajahn Chah tradition, there's no fixed absolute limit of age for ordination, but informally they don't generally ordain anyone over the age of 50, although they'll make exceptions on a case-to-case basis. It's not a hard and fast rule, but the general rule is 50. It's difficult. It's difficult for an older man, because by the time you're getting on in years, you're too fixed in your ways. It's difficult to adjust to a monastic life. What is the meaning of suchness in Buddhism? Tatata is I take it to mean just that's is a statement of this is the things in their own nature. This is just as it is, without the nature of reality, without adding on to it mental proliferations and so forth. It's just the immediate reality of things. Okay. Okay, so let's see. There's another one just popped in here. While practicing insight, I experientially realized that jhana and associated phenomena itself will not lead to fruit after passing through nimitta. Do you think that's the point of this insight stage? Yeah, I think what you may be expressing there is the stage of realizing what is path and what the knowledge of what is path and what is not path. That I dealt with this in some detail in my last series of talks. If you didn't hear those, you can look that one up. I don't see the drawbacks of chasing pleasure. Can you help me to see it? For example, if we were masturbating to porn or watching shows, what would be the hidden drawback? Well, the Buddha talked about sense pleasures as having satisfaction and gratification and a danger. There's always a danger in sense pleasures because even the most benign kind of sense pleasures, at the very least, they keep you limited or tied down to the kama bhumi, the sense experience level of consciousness, and there's no possibility of liberation for a mind that's engrossed in sense pleasures. Also, most sense pleasures will have some deleterious effect beyond that as well, some kind of harm to the body or to the psyche, and they don't provide any lasting or real satisfaction. The gratification that is experienced is limited and fleeting. There's always a price to be paid for it. I just want to be high all the time. I don't know, from childhood trauma or previous karma. Please advise. Thank you, Bhante. Well, that sounds like an addiction, not perhaps not a physical addiction, but there's a mental addiction, like a habit that you feel a need to gratify this state of this false euphoria of that comes from taking intoxicants. My advice would be to abstain completely for a period of time and see how that affects your consciousness. and just make a firm vow, for the next month. I'm not going to take any intoxicants and see how it affects you. Okay, suggestion for a video on gradual training method mentioned in MN 107. Yeah, that might be actually a good series to do. I'll keep that in mind. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there this time, and next week at this time I'll discuss the aggregate of form or body, rupa, materiality. Okay, goodbye all.